An enterprise-wide business continuity testing policy should be established by the board and senior management and should set expectations for business lines and support functions to follow in implementing testing strategies and test plans. The policy should establish a testing cycle that increases in scope and complexity over time. As such, the testing policy should continuously improve by adapting to changes in business conditions and supporting expanded integration testing. The testing policy should incorporate the use of a BIA and risk assessment for developing enterprise-wide and business line continuity testing strategies. The policy should identify key roles and responsibilities and establish minimum requirements for the institution's business continuity testing, including baseline requirements for frequency, scope, and reporting test results. Testing policies will vary depending on the size and risk profile of the institution. While all institutions should develop testing policies on an enterprise-wide basis and involve essential employees in the testing process, some considerations differ depending on whether the institution relies on service providers, serviced institutions, or whether it processes its work internally, in-house. The testing policy for in-house institutions should address the active involvement of personnel when systems and data files are tested. In-house institutions often send their backup media to a recovery site to be processed by the backup service provider's employees. This is not a sufficient test of an institution's BCP and is considered ineffective because financial institution employees are not directly involved in the testing process. As a result, the institution cannot verify that tests were conducted properly and institution personnel may not be familiar with recovery procedures and related logistics in the event of a true disaster. Once an institution develops the testing policy, this policy is typically implemented through the development of testing strategies that include the testing scope and objectives and test planning using various scenarios and testing methods. The testing policy should include enterprise-wide testing strategies that establish expectations for individual business lines. Business lines include all internal and external supporting functions, such as IT and facilities management. Across the testing life cycle of planning, execution, measurement, reporting, and test process improvement. The testing strategy should include the following: expectations for business lines and support functions to demonstrate the achievement of business continuity test objectives consistent with the BIA and risk assessment. A description of the depth and breadth of testing to be accomplished. The involvement of staff, technology, and facilities. Expectations for testing internal and external interdependencies. And an evaluation of the reasonableness of assumptions used in developing the testing strategy. Testing strategies should include the testing scope and objectives, which clearly define what functions, systems, or processes are going to be tested and what will constitute a successful test. The objective of a testing program is to ensure that the business continuity planning process is accurate, relevant, and viable under adverse conditions. Therefore, the business continuity planning process should be tested at least annually, with more frequent testing required when significant changes have occurred in business operations. Testing should include applications and business functions that were identified during the BIA. The BIA determines the recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives, which then help determine the appropriate recovery strategy. Validation of the RPOs and RTOs is important to ensure that they are attainable. Testing objectives should start simply and gradually increase in complexity and scope. The scope of individual tests can be continually expanded to eventually encompass enterprise-wide testing and testing with vendors and key market participants. Achieving the following objectives provides progressive levels of assurance and confidence in the plan. At a minimum, the testing scope and objectives should not jeopardize normal business operations. Gradually increase the complexity, level of participation, functions, and physical locations involved. Demonstrate a variety of management and response proficiencies under simulated crisis conditions, progressively involving more resources and participants. Uncover inadequacies so that testing procedures can be revised. Consider deviating from the test script to interject unplanned events, such as the loss of key individuals or services. and involve a sufficient volume of all types of transactions to ensure adequate capacity and functionality of the recovery facility. Management should prepare and review a scripts for each test prior to testing to identify weaknesses that could lead to unsatisfactory or invalid tests. As part of the review process, the testing plan should be revised to account for any changes to key personnel, policies, procedures, facilities, equipment, outsourcing relationships, vendors, or other components that affect a critical business function. In addition, as a preliminary step to the testing process, management should perform a thorough review of the BCP checklist review. A checklist review involves distributing copies of the BCP to the managers of each critical business unit and requesting that they review portions of the plan applicable to the department to ensure that the procedures are comprehensive and complete.